Welcome to Space Insiders. I'm Tony Sewell and here with my mate Rob Ruyak. How you going, Rob?
Great, Tony. Excited to catch up with you today and for our next interview. It's going
Yeah,
to be a good one.
it is a really good one. So we recorded this last week. We met with Kristin Sargent, who's a dear friend of ours and just a really innovating and energetic and just really talented person. Tell us a little bit about her background, Rob.
Yeah, I've known Kristen for a long time, past life, professionally. We become really close friends over the years. She's just what I like about her is that she brings a really what's the right way to put it? Empathetic, personal, emotional aspect of everything she does. Everything from being a veteran to
Really
working in
high EQ. Like,
huge, yeah,
yeah,
very
yeah.
much, and so for anyone that's out there looking for a mentor who brings kind of the personal side to business, and how to keep building your confidence and figuring out the best way to pursue the most challenging aspects of your professional life, she is one of the top, in my opinion, and her background lends itself really, really well with very practical and prescriptive guidance around how to do work with government, especially if you're a commercial software company or just kind of a commercial company in general.
Yeah, I can speak to the mentoring from personal experience. She has a real knack for that. I reckon she's got a business in that in her future because
Absolutely.
she's great at working with people and helping people see opportunity and clarify their thinking. So really good discussion. I think that this is a super timely discussion with Kristen as well because I think as we've seen over the last couple of months of doing these interviews, more and more as kind of the geopolitics is changing, and I guess as space is being seen through a much more clearly through a defense investment lens. The ability for entrepreneurs and companies to be able to develop a strategy focused on defense, understand how to go after defense business. That's really her specialty.
It is, and yeah, to your point around the defense tech space, it's interesting because my personal first love is the space market, and it's quickly expanding, however, to even broader than that, where space actually integrates with other kind of defense solutions. Because now, we talk a little bit about this in an interview, which I really like. We asked Kristen, like from her point of view, why do we think things are changing now in terms of how government's looking at and procuring new solutions and capabilities, and a lot of it is kind of this rejuvenated patriotic feel. And I think we finally have this recognition that our competition, especially our adversaries, are actually kind of doing it already.
Right.
And so, this idea of having that kind of burn in your belly to actually, do something with purpose, especially a government mission, and as a software company or a commercial company or space commercial company, now the door might be open to do more of that. So it's an exciting time from that perspective.
Yeah. All right. I can't wait to get to the discussion. Before we get there, a couple of interesting announcements or sort of news items from the last week. The first one, which is just incredible, it's mind-boggling. Firefly, their IPO went live last week. I mean, we've met a few people from Firefly through some of these interviews, and it's been interesting. There've been a few kind of ups and downs for them in the last few months, but boy, their IPO just it went to the moon. Like they listed at $45 at the end of the first day. They ended up at about 68 and a half billion dollar valuation. I don't know where it is where it started today,
Yeah.
but what do you reckon's behind this, Rob?
It's absolutely nuts. But
It
also,
is like, I mean, congratulations to the Firefly team. I mean,
totally. I mean,
it's
it's
incredible.
some of these guys, and I look on LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of these folks. Like there's an individual I've met him several times before. Very interesting guy, Eric Solwin, I think is his name. He's been there since the beginning, and then you look at some of his posts on LinkedIn, and the trials and the challenges and everything else that this company's been through, from leadership changes to wanting to work directly with government, but having kind of the non-U.S. citizen challenges that they had, and learning from that and recapitalizing and finding new investment and all this kind of stuff it's a pretty awesome story, frankly.
Yeah.
And I think to see a company like this do as well as it did the first couple days, like, hopefully it'll sustain the value over time. But I think it's a really interesting lesson for a lot of people to learn when they look at something like this. And what I mean by that is, you could have a hot technology or hot company and you can get a lot of buzz around it. It might be even be in the right market with the right buzz. So you're attracting a lot of investors and a lot of people that might just be excited about the market like space and then want to invest. But the difference here, though, is that this company is a really strong portfolio of existing business and potential new business. That's everything from, they have multiple launch vehicles. They have one, it's the Alpha rocket. They've launched a handful of times. They have a multi-year agreement with Lockheed Martin to launch satellites. Like, that's a solidified, revenue stream for them. Given their success as they eventually make that a more sustainable launch vehicle. They have a new one, the medium launch vehicle, which is going to be, it's in partnership with Northrop Grumman. We've talked about how they've landed the Blue Ghost lander, and they've won multiple additional follow-on task orders for that kind of work. Um, One of which is really cool. It's almost $200 million task order for sending the next lander to the moon's south pole to look for water ice and do other kind of experimentation. And they also have this spacecraft that they've been building for the last several years called Elytra, and they're targeting a lot of that for various national security missions. So and other types of commercial applications that it's a spacecraft that'll orbit for a year plus. So they have a plethora of different capabilities they've been building, and they've been winning about $1 billion in backlog of government
Yeah.
contracts. So it's really unique. I think we talked a little bit about Voyager, how they've structured the business to be responsive and targeted to government, but these guys have a strong backlog, and I think it showed in the first couple days of trading when they did their IPO. So it's exciting to see how they move forward from this and how the value sustains itself over time.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be interesting to see if we can get someone on the show that's still working there, and just to
Hmm.
get a bit of a view on sort of where they see the future, and we'll work on that anyway. Cool. So the other one that caught my eye is Amazon Kuiper made a massive announcement last week. Now, full disclosure, I'm on the Amazon Kuiper team, but I'm not giving any. There's nothing. This is all public information. But they announced a deal with the National Broadband Network in Australia. So NBN is it's a government-backed entity that provides broadband to consumers in Australia, and it's obviously in a country like Australia, terrestrial connectivity can be kind of like in the US. It can be challenging for people to get good internet. So this is a massive announcement, I guess a massive signal, I guess, to the market of the confidence that at least the Australian government has in Amazon's ability to deliver on this. So really, they're joining the fight now. I mean, Starlink is a long way ahead, but it's a major boost for the company.
Yeah, and it's so exciting just to see that there's so much demand for just connectivity.
Yeah.
I mean, what about everything else that actually is what you do with the
Yeah.
connectivity that's
Yeah.
gonna actually come about? There's going to be those proven businesses, right? That now could be accessible to those locations that haven't had the connectivity, but there's going to be a whole bunch of new ideas, and I think that's what's going to be the most exciting part of all of this.
Yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to see how things progress in that Leo space over the next couple of years. All right, so we're going to go to the interview with Kristin now. I do want to give one shameless plug before we get there. So uh, on the 26th of August, if you're in Atlanta, we are running our second Launch and Libations happy hour. So this is a gathering of folks in the space industry. There's some really interesting companies in space in Atlanta that there's a bit more of a concentration. I think a lot of people realize, and so it's a fantastic opportunity. You can see the details on LinkedIn. It's going to be at the Scofflaw Brewing. But anyway, if you want to get any more information about that, just hit me up. I'll also post a link in the show notes. And with that, Rob, I think let's bring in Kristin.
Let's do it.
See you in a minute. Welcome back to the show. And Kristin, so great to have you here for the 10th episode of Space Insiders.
Thanks so much for having me, Tony and Rob. I'm so excited to be here. You guys are putting out great content. It's important for the industry. So excited to be here.
Well, we've been waiting to talk to you, Kristin. This is super exciting for us. You know, we love space and startups and how government's changing. So, and you're like the right person to talk to. So we're really grateful that you decided to do this with us.
Of course.
Yeah, Kristin, it's super timely, and we really want to hear about your business and your journey. Rob and I were just talking about how, like the big news today was Firefly went public, their IPO, and they closed the day at an $8.5 billion valuation. They're up almost 35% in the day, which is just incredible. We've seen over the last couple of months we've been doing the shows, we've been talking to people. Defense has been a much bigger deal for space in this current environment. So with sort of that backdrop, can you tell us a little bit about your background and why you started Sargent Initiatives?
Absolutely. So, I feel like space has been a part of my career the whole time. It's really always had a role in the operations I've been a part of. And so I started my career as an air defense artillery officer, dealing with Patriot missiles and leading batteries that were in charge of such important capabilities and in charge of protecting really important capabilities. And what was interesting is at the tail end of my time as an air defense artillery officer, I was asked as an additional duty to become my battalion's information management officer. And I had no training and actually no business kind of stepping into that role, but I did it. And what I watched was just a complete breakdown of how commercial technologies were being used within my own unit. And I remember thinking at the time, this was around 2006, this is how we're going to lose the war, right? So we have to kind of crack this code. And I really spent my career at the intersection of defense and security and technology, first by leaving the military and going to Booz Allen Hamilton, managing cyber programs there, but also building large contracts as a part of the capture teams there. And then moved on to AWS, as Rob well knows. And really, when I got to AWS, was kind of underwhelmed at AWS's institutional understanding of how to really go to market in the public space. And so that was really surprising, is really as a company, AWS was doing well because of the quality of the technology. But in actuality, we could have been servicing so many more customers, so many more defense and intel and other customers, had we really known how the Booz Allens of the world go to market and how they play in the space. From AWS, I went to a startup and we had all of the resources you could really ask for. We had a $1 billion valuation with over $200 million in funding. We had all of the right board members, a ton of incredible talent, and we really struggled to execute. And that was so eye-opening for me, was I watched us making mistakes that we didn't need to make. And I just couldn't stand by anymore and watch companies make mistakes going to market that prevent the government from really getting the best possible capabilities in a timely manner. That's also, without wasting time and resources across these companies that are trying to do so much with so little at the start. And so that's really the impetus for me starting Sargent Initiatives Inc. is just really kind of going after that problem set.
And you've been doing this for 2 years now too, which is incredible, because a lot of people don't make it past the first sort of 6 or 12 months.
It's as mission fulfilling as serving in the military was.
Yeah.
Like, I really just love my clients. I love the work that we get to do in making it easier for them to understand and really decompose how to go to market in bite-sized pieces. And so, yeah, it's been a long 2 years and a short 2 years all at the same time.
Well, Kristen, like, tell us more about what you're doing. Tell us a little bit about the company. Um, so I think how you just explained, where you were before, kind of why you had this kind of maybe this burning urge, but what is it that you do, and why is it so fulfilling?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rob. Thank you. So I was a math and English major in college. And so I love kind of creating simple formulas that help people solve a problem or find the answers that are going to unlock their potential. And so what I've done, our company has developed a proprietary baseline that's just a simple mile wide, inch deep look across all of the significant corporate functions that have to be orchestrated like a fine-tuned symphony in order to be successful in defense. And so we look at people and culture, we look at security and product, and we look at operations just to make sure that you kind of can see how all of these different functions must work together, and then also identify any gaps that are going to be essential for you to address to be able to go after the market. And so all my work, all my client work is really focused on kind of helping companies get that report card on how able and how ready they are to go to market. And then we work at filling those gaps with the incredible ecosystem of support that's out there.
And what is some of that ecosystem of support? I'm assuming maybe you're not just talking. Maybe not maybe you're not talking about commercial and government markets. Maybe it's just government. Like, which one? And what are those kind of ecosystem partners or groups that a company can lean on, that you can kind of introduce them to kind of help?
Yeah, so I lean on a lot of ATO platforms, for example. So a lot of the clients I work with are pretty software based. And so,
And
as anyone knows,
Yeah.
ATO.
oh, sorry, authority to operate. Great. Yes. Please slow me down when I start
And what is
talking.
authority to operate, Kristen?
So, yeah. So the authority to operate is the government's approval that yes, this technology is secure, it meets the government's requirements to then run on a production network.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's required if you're going to scale across the defense sector. I mean, you don't want to just get the proofs of concept that prove that your tech works. You have to then invest in actually working with the government and getting your technology accredited so that it can work at scale in really sensitive environments. And so that's a process, and it's really hard. And the options are either to try to do it yourself and hire the talent and take the time to build those accreditations into your platform, or you can work with a company that if you run your technology within their platform, you're inheriting all of those controls. So it saves time, it saves money, and it allows you to focus on building your intellectual property instead of this undifferentiated technical capability you still are required to have. And so I like to partner with those types of companies that then really help my clients focus on what they're supposed to be good at and not worry about this other stuff. Another great example is a lot of legal departments have no idea how to navigate intellectual property requirements. They have no idea sort of what the terms and conditions are that have to flow down from a prime contractor to a vendor and how to navigate that. So just kind of backstopping some of these commercial startup legal departments with the right government legal expertise, just to kind of get them out of their own way. That's another easy place to really make sure that they aren't tripping over their own shoes unnecessarily. And then, I also love hooking up my clients with, this week I was talking to, they're kind of a new financial institution that a lot of companies don't realize is out there, but traditional banks often won't give you the type of lending that you need to manage your cash flow in order to really make sure that you're still building the tech you need to while waiting for maybe the government to pay you after you've already performed or submitted your deliverables on a government contract. There are companies out there that can help with that type of cash flow challenge. So I try to really look at the entire ecosystem of help that any company might need and might just need temporarily, or just might need in a certain situation, so that they can keep moving as fast as they can to build their capabilities.
I'm sure it's tempting for a lot of these small companies just to think, oh, I can do this myself. Do you see that a lot?
I do. I mean, I do until you get into the C-suite of a startup and they just want to move as fast as possible. I think everyone does ultimately realize that time is the single resource you can't get back. And so when push comes to shove, I see more and more startups, especially, and I'm really glad to see this trend, kind of recognize I cannot do this myself. This is going to cost me a lot more in the long run if I try to. And so they do make the investment, but it does take real education of the C-suite to make sure, and the board especially, to make sure that that type of investment is achievable and that everyone's on the same sheet as to why you have to make it and then what's on the far end of making that investment.
Well, why do you think, and we've been talking about this on a couple of our episodes, which I am especially very interested in. I know you share this interest, Kristen, because we've talked about it for I don't know how many years we've known each other about this topic is how do you like when is the warfighter going to get the best capability that's out there in the commercial market? And a lot of times, you work with small companies, maybe even large companies that are seeing these big awards. It could be anything, and they want to kind of enter the government market. And they're, sometimes it's too hard, it's too slow, the sales cycles stink. My investors aren't going to invest in me because they know it's never going to come to fruition, or backlog is fictitious, it's not really value. But there's a lot of change going on right now. There's a lot more startups. Defense tech is a hot term. We talked about Firefly, $8.5 billion valuation based on a backlog of $1 billion, not real revenue yet. So it's like baked in future growth. What, why is this happening right now from your perspective, especially given what you just said about how hard it is, to even sell to government?
Well, I think there's a couple things happening. Number one, I think that the macro global economic conditions are kind of ripe for patriotism to kind of come to the forefront. Right? I really am seeing companies that start their journey in pursuing defense tech because they want to get a couple defense logos on their investment pitch so that when they go to the next series round, they can get a higher valuation. They come into it wanting that, and then they come out of the experience of going after the government realizing that they've become a part of the bigger purpose, right? They've become a part of something that's really in service to our nation and to the way of life that we're accustomed to. And so I think that that's part of it. I also think we're seeing some really positive developments in how the government is really pushing for acquisition of commercial off-the-shelf technology. Right? We saw Hegseth put out some memos that were really kind of pushing for streamlined acquisitions, really pushing for commercial opening solicitations, and really helping to put organizations like DIU at the forefront because of the innovations that they've really pushed in terms of acquisition. And so we're starting to see some of the bureaucratic barriers come down, and that's really exciting. And so when you've got a government that's saying, you know what, we do want commercial technology first, and then they're actually taking actions, right, regardless of your political kind of affiliation, they are taking actions that help reduce barriers for getting commercial technology into government spaces, that's a really positive indicator. So I think just in general, if you're someone on the outside following X or following different articles on LinkedIn or just kind of keeping up with the news, there's a lot of just things in the air that are making the environment seem ripe for opportunity.
Over the last couple of episodes, we've actually spoken to a couple of Australian entrepreneurs that have brought their businesses to the US and are having some success. But we do have quite an international audience, and there's obviously a lot going on in the defense space in Europe at the moment. But for companies that are thinking about whether they're US commercial companies that are thinking about moving into defense, or international companies thinking they want to get a piece of the action in the US, like what are some of the misconceptions about selling to the US federal government customer?
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard your interview with Rich Julian, and I loved his kind of real breakdown of AUKUS and some of the import-export kind of intricacies that are relaxing a little bit in order to enable more innovation across boundaries. I think really, like, if I step back, when I've talked to different international companies interested in entering the US market, especially for defense, they come in with a mindset that because I'm a close ally of the United States, it's just a little harder for me. That's not true, right? It's really hard for everyone, and it's extra hard, right? Now you have to navigate tariffs and what that might do to your supply chain. Where are you going to be manufacturing anything that might need to be manufactured so that it can actually reliably get to the US warfighter, right? Those are questions that defense acquisition officers are routinely asking now to make sure that when they acquire, no matter from whom, that they can actually deliver, that the vendor can actually deliver on the capability when and where the military needs it. And so there are so many bigger, broader questions about execution for an international company that have to be addressed as you come into the market. And so just making sure that your mindset is kind of working backwards from literally the ground soldier, airman, right, or seaman, whomever, that person, you're really working backwards from that user all the way to where you transact or sale and understand all the puts and takes that have to be accounted for in that supply chain. I think that's really critical from an international perspective. And then also, right, I do think it should be encouraging. So take all of the political and sort of global news that might be out there with the Trump administration and tariffs, et cetera. It might seem like international capabilities aren't welcome here. I could totally understand someone having that perception in some cases. I don't think that's the case, where the rubber meets the road. At the end of the day, the Army, when they are procuring, they just care about what is going to get the mission done and what solves their problem. And that's pervasive across all of the services. And so at the end of the day, if you've got a mission essential solution, I don't care who you are, or where you make it, what country you're from, I think there's an appetite for us kind of understanding that solution and figuring out a way to do business. And so I do think I see that more at the tactical levels than might be readily apparent on the outside looking in.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting on the international discussion. I think a lot of people in the US, like, I'll put myself in this category, as we all have certain biases. We want to work with companies, or we want to, serve the governments of other countries. We have kind of this bias that things work a certain way. And I think I heard someone speak about this recently. Someone actually who used to work in the Defense Department, and this question was asked of her. And her response was like, how do I actually sell to international? And her answer was, remember, you have biases by default, and focus on the customer, the warfighter, no matter where they are, because it could be different depending on who you talk to. And I think that's something that, especially startups where they don't have as much, like you said, time is like the most important thing. You're not going to, knowing some of those things going in and listening and understanding how, business is done differently in different countries. And, the warfighter might have different needs, in Europe versus the US, like, listen, pay attention, work backwards, and figure out how you fit, I think is something that, is also important. It's important advice for a lot of these companies, especially when they're trying to sell outside the US.
Yeah. Not to be
Yeah.
cliche, but my company's tagline is because execution matters, right? I've been in the room, I've been a part of PowerPoint briefings to the government about a capability that frankly just does not exist, right? There's a great notional idea of a capability that could exist, but we need capabilities that exist today, and we need them fast. So, I always kind of push on my clients and push on anyone who will listen to just kind of make sure that they've thought through the execution aspect of really delivering for the military and for DoD. That's what our nation deserves and requires.
Kristin, what's the type of customer that you really like working with, and if you've got any examples of some of your customers that have you've been able to help have a breakthrough, and what sort of made that successful?
Yeah. So my favorite companies have got a little bit of maturity and they've got a little bit of scale, right? I like the companies that are anywhere above 50 people. I find that that's about the sweet spot for when folks have been running so fast and they're pretty excellent in their own respective lanes, but that's where things start to kind of become a little bit unsynchronized across lanes. And that's really key and what I like to fix. But I've had the opportunity to work with publicly traded companies too. In fact, the reason I got the work is because the CEO is explaining, we just had a federal salesperson. We hired our first federal salesperson full time. They were with us for a year and they didn't deliver on quota. And so we had to let him go. And I looked at the CEO and I said, "Well, how do you know you're not the problem?" Right? And he just kind of was like, "Holy cow." And it was from there that I was able to kind of build the trust of like, this is a team sport. And so you just don't know what you don't know. But the clients I like working with, they're starting to really get some momentum and things are about to go wobbly if they don't do a couple things right. So, for example, I had an AI startup that was about to land their first classified contract. Well, concurrently, their CEO was courting foreign investment dollars. And so had he taken them, well, now you're in a totally different situation corporately because now you can't get foreign ownership, controlled, and influence approved by, well, I'm going to try to spell out the acronyms here, by the defense
Guy, right?
counter
Vote guy.
FOCI. Yep, FOCI.
Yeah,
I think I just nailed that one, by the way. FOCI
you
approved
did.
by the defense, is it DCSA, Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency? Check me on that. You should do a fact check after this. But right, he would have jeopardized what the company was going to need to be able to deliver on that cleared contract. Right, another one, a client of mine was really advanced in maturing their product, and their chief product officer had an incredible ear and was listening and absorbing all of the information I was providing about what defense and intel takes. And he knew immediately, I don't know, and I don't think any of the team that I've hired knows what we have to do or how we have to build uniquely to make sure we don't have to re-engineer anything later on for this market. And so we were able to connect them to one of those ATO companies who was able to inform them, okay, if you build, following these general guidelines, you're going to be okay, and be able to make sure your product is always ready to go. So, it's things like that they've got some commercial scale, they're moving, and I don't want you to slow down ever, but how do we kind of keep you moving, but keep the wheels on the bus so that you can preserve the long-term defense and intel opportunity for your business?
Yeah, and I think you know, it's important for everyone to remember that at least the US government has been operating within a contract environment that started in the late 30s, right before World War II. It's actually an awesome book if you're interested in reading it. I'm almost done with it. It's called Freedom's Forge, and it's all about how commercial industry was turned on by a few people that really came out of Ford and GM to reinvent supply chain for government to ready this country for World War II, which was going to be, was an impending danger that at the time President Roosevelt actually didn't think was going to be an issue until Churchill started calling day in and day out that they're on our front doorstep. And it's really interesting to read this book because you see how it's very similar to now, but different, right? It's time to activate commercial industry, gear it towards a warfighter and defense. There's a greater mission associated with it. And, down the road, there's going to be so much innovation that will not only serve the warfighter, but also, provide benefit to us in general, in the world in general, that we have yet to see. But as all those kind of stars align, really good things happen. But the one thing that it talks about is how the government had to change how they bought stuff, right? Everything was custom cabinetry, right? And still has kind of been that way for the last, almost 100 years, frankly. So especially as people that haven't really sold to government, worked in government. It's really important, to your point, when you talk about meeting with a CEO and maybe they're the problem. I think that's where the cultural disconnect could be a real issue for companies that really do feel passionate about selling their capability to the warfighter, see it as a big market opportunity as well to value their company. There's a significant cultural shift, which I agree with you. It's interesting to see the Andurils, Palantirs, Scale AIs, all of these now being top of mind whenever you talk to anyone that works in the old guard defense contractor market, right?
Yeah, totally.
Um, and so I agree. And with all of that, what recommendation do you have for a startup that really does want to work in government? We've talked about a couple different things, but to me, they don't want to wait to talk to someone like you, Kristen, and say, "Oh, I have a problem. Sales cycle's too long. I don't know if this is the place to be." Why would they engage you, and how do you kind of set up the framework for them to think about, getting ahead of it versus it happening to them and then it's almost too late?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, right, the number the top characteristics of when someone engages me or why someone engages me are generally because either a company has already wasted significant time and resources and still is nowhere farther along, and so they're like, we're doing something wrong but we can't diagnose it. So that's usually, right, a solid indicator. Or two, it's a very humble leadership team who knows what they know they don't know what they need to go after the sector, and they need someone to help educate them on what investments to make and when, and sort of how to create the right order of effects, if you will. And so, you know, no, that equation is different and unique to each company. What you have already available to you for a federal go-to-market is very different depending on the type of product or the type of service you're selling, and then also the degree to which you have commercial traction, the types of commercial companies you're already selling to. And so usually I find there's stuff already available to work with. And so really what I like to do is kind of assess that as is state, so that you can leverage everything that you've already built, and then figure out, where might you have gaps that need to be filled, and then just build a very simple timeline, really working off of the government fiscal year and the buying
Mm.
season, to make it more realizable for the entire team as to what is achievable within kind of each government fiscal year, going out 3-4 years from where you currently are. And so, for example, I had a company come to me and say, we're really interested in getting some help and going after federal. And I said, well, you're not going to get anything done this government fiscal year, right? Like, there's not enough time to get them up and running and being able to sell. And so I'm going to meet with them again after the government fiscal year turns over, because then they'll be at the right point in how the government buys and when the government normally buys, to really make the right decisions and, skate to the hockey puck along the lines of
Mm.
what the government
Yeah.
requires.
Yeah. So, Kristen, just switching gears a little bit, one of the kind of through lines in all the discussions we've had in the interviews over the last couple of months has been around like the importance of leadership and culture. And you've worked in a range of different organizations. We all work together at AWS, where culture is a very big part of it. I remember, Rob, the discussion we had with Jana Spruce way back at the start, where like as a consultant, one of the core things she talked to her clients about was how to build a like high performing culture in a technical team. So I'm interested just to hear like from you, like what have you learned through your experience with various different companies? And I'm sure you talk about culture and leadership a lot with your clients too.
Yeah,
So
I do. I think culture is actually one of it's once it's wrong, it's hard to right.
mm,
You know, no, for me, culturally, I go back. I always kind of distill everything down into very like the kernel of what I recall culture being. And so in the Army, for me, it was one saying: mission, men, me, right? Always in that order, with that being your priority. And to me, that's just so obvious, right? Take care of mission first, then you take care of your people, then you take care of yourself. That is so obvious to me. And what was great is when it's that pervasive and obvious to an organization like the Army, right? Customer obsession is pretty much the same thing in Amazon. And so I've watched sort of the kernels of culture that I gravitate towards really be a part of every single organization I've had the privilege of being a part of. And in my company, right, I wanted the kernel to be really simple and kind of authentic to what I think matters in the sector. And because execution matters, to me, it's again probably just another take on mission, men, me, and customer obsession, but execution and the ability to over deliver for customers is something that I aim to do with my company, is something I want my clients to do when they sell to the government. And so just having that be the kernel of the culture that we build at Sargent Initiatives is really, really important to me.
That
Chris,
I love. Sorry, I just wanted to I love the how you've sort of drawn that line between mission, like your military experience, because I'm a veteran as well, and but that mission men me sort of connection to customer obsession. I'd never thought of it like that, because it's not always obvious to. I mean, not all people act that way, putting themselves last, and so it's a fascinating comparison. I never thought of it that way before.
Yeah, I mean,
I like those principles that kind of that kind of exert humility. I think that one is one of them. The other one I like, Kristen, was when you and I were at Booz Allen. I don't know if you remember, there was one years ago that was called the essential partner, which I liked too. Which was, we can call you a client, call you a customer, which means, you're probably buying something from us, right? To more like, we want to sit next to you at the table, and we want to be so valuable that we can't live without each other, which I always actually really was attracted to as well. There's kind of that humility within some of these principles. I think are really important, especially probably when selling to government.
Well, and what I also found interesting is, especially at Amazon mechanizes the principles that they want to be a part of the culture, right? When Amazon said hire and develop the best, right? We had the bar raisers in interviews, making sure that who we hired was, in the top 50% of people hired at that level in that role. And so I really took that to heart, and I look forward to kind of mechanizing the core principles that become a part of everyday operations at my company over time.
Yeah, they kind of are like, it's like a social contract the way it works, right? It's something that people accept, and to your point, mechanizes it. It's like a social everyone understands that at the end of the day, everyone can have a really good idea that they present, but at the end of the day, does the customer really care? As a kind of a question is, it is unique, and a lot of companies do that, and they're successful for it.
Kristin, another thing that that a reason why I really enjoy talking to you, and we've spoken a bit over the last sort of 12 months as I've been kind of charting my path. You're a very courageous person. And the way that you approach your career, and how you've really embraced entrepreneurship. How important is, tell us about courage and grit as an entrepreneur or as a business leader. How do you think about that, and how do you talk about that to your clients?
It's funny. I don't think that there is any courage or grit without self-love. It all kind of has to come from a belief that you can do it, and that that you can figure it out, and that even when you don't know how to do it, you've got the skills to either ask people or research or do whatever it's going to take to figure it out and get it done. And if you've got self-love, then your ability to kind of read your own instincts, make your own decisions, navigate in completely ambiguous situations it's you can't do it without self-love. I kind of find that it keeps going back to that. And then I so appreciate you, Tony, saying that I have courage and grit. It's funny, I don't feel that way at all. Right. I don't. And it's funny, I said this recently, I think to my therapist, I said, I'm pretty risk averse. And she said, Kristin,
Serious?
Said,
what does that make me? Jeez.
But I said this to my therapist, and she said, Kristin, you chose to go into air defense artillery. Like, you chose the only combat arms branch available to women. And then you chose to go to airborne school. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I just had to do those things, right? And so, I appreciate you, categorizing what I've done as courageous or having grit, but starting my own business, it was literally like, I had a job offer from an incredible company to work with an unbelievable team, and my body just shut down. It was like, you cannot do this. This feels like something you've already done. This would feel like moving laterally or backwards.
Because it wasn't risky enough.
I mean, maybe.
but you get comfortable in these big companies. I mean, it's tremendous opportunity.
But I think when you love yourself, then you're like, all right, let's go. Like let's follow. Let's sing the song that your soul is singing, and just go with it and see what happens. And I think that's been the most remarkable part of my journey is, I totally thought that leaving corporate to start my own business was going to feel like jumping off a cliff. And it's not even close to that sensation. It's remarkable how there's an entire community of entrepreneurs out there cheering for you, wanting to help you because they've been through it, who want to pay it forward. And it's, you immediately fall on, a ton of incredible colleagues, just like you do when you join a big company, and you're there and a part of that family too. So it's a really remarkable experience. And if folks want to start their own business, man, go for it.
Kristin, can you please text me the name and number of your therapist after this is over?
I don't think she's taking any more patients, Rob.
Oh, she really should be.
Yeah, she's good.
But no, I think it's a beautiful point you make, though. I don't think I've ever heard anyone in my professional experience actually say that. It's one thing when you hear someone's. I've had a lot of this feedback. You need to be more direct. You need to be more aggressive. You need to be more pushy, whatever it is, right? And you need to do what you can to. You need to do what you can to get what you want, right? But frankly, I've never really signed up for that. Maybe it's because of who I am, or maybe, I don't know. But I think starting off with not just saying I'm confident, but truly thinking about like, what do you love? What do you love about yourself? And using that as a foundation is like a very unique piece of advice I don't think I've heard before. So I love how you've summed it up that way.
And I mean, it's funny. Someone was asking me, I'm training right now for a mountain bike race, and they're like, why are you doing this? And I said, well, because it's new and I think I can do it. It sounds like fun. And so I think, people don't realize, and a lot of times in your personal life, you take a lot of risks. You try new things. The same can be true in your professional life. And so I just try to keep a kind of a wide aperture on how I can take the things that I do every day and build on them to go bigger professionally.
Yeah. And in the end, like, life's not a rehearsal. So
that's right.
Well, Kristin, I think this was a really good way to wrap up the formal part of the interview. It's always I always love talking to you about this stuff. It was really good. So we like to finish our interviews with a little bit of a fun question. So I was interested in, have you had a brush with fame?
Brush with fame. I mean, so a couple things, yes. One, about 6 months after I started my own company, I walked into a conference and someone said, I know you. And I said, where did we meet? And they said, I've seen you on LinkedIn. I thought, wow, I'm now a LinkedIn influencer. I don't know, like I was putting out a lot of content at the time.
You were, yeah.
And so that was pretty cool. But no, this is kind of quintessential DC. 2 weeks ago, my partner and I were with our next door neighbors. We always go get pizza and beer at the same spot. It's right outside of Nats Park. And we go every week religiously. And on this particular day, we walked in, sat down at a table kind of along the side of the restaurant. And Secret Service came in and they kind of cleared out an area and they cleared out all of the tables surrounding us. And it turns out that Defense Secretary Hegseth and his wife and his kids' friends all walked in.
Wow.
And ate dinner right there, kind of 8 feet from us. And so in terms of brush of fame, I would say those two stories are the first things that pop in
That is
head.
the cool thing about living in DC. You just never know who you're going to come across. What
They're
about you,
everywhere.
Rob?
Have I had a brush with
Yeah.
fame?
Yeah. What's a memorable one for you?
Well, probably the most memorable was in college. I went to a B.B. King show at the Warner Theater here in DC, and I was able to get backstage passes and actually met him. And this was in the late 90s. So he was still very active and he was excellent. And I mean, I actually got to shake his hand, and I'm a huge
awesome.
fan of B.B. King. I play blues music on guitar, and so I was really kind of hot into seeing him, and so that was probably one of the coolest experiences I've had with, seeing in the flesh a famous person. That was probably that was the top of mind brush with fame that I had.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was cool.
Very good. All right.
What about you, my friend?
Me.
You didn't answer the question.
Right.
You can't get off without answering that question.
Probably one of the funniest ones. I have had one of those DC experiences. Was at a restaurant, Rob, that you and I've been to a few times, Rasika. A heap of Secret Service people in there. It turned out Michelle Obama was this was back in the Obama days, was dining there. But the funniest one I had was when I was years ago, when not long after I moved to the US, my sister came over to visit it. I met her up in New York, and she hadn't been to New York before, and it was winter, and she really wanted to go ice skating in Central Park. So we're lined up, and she's right. My sister's right. She was right into jeans at that time, and like I wouldn't know, like True Religion jeans. She knew what True Religion jeans look like, and she really wanted to get a pair. And anyway, we're standing behind these people with this couple of blokes with kids running around, and she said, "Oh, that's what True Religion jeans are." And I was like, "Okay." And anyway, this guy sort of turned his head. It was Kelsey Grammer, and he was there with his kids.
That's awesome.
And then the other bloke that was with him turned around. It was John Voight.
What?
So they were there with their young trophy wives dropping the kids off at the ice skating rink. So that was a kind of a cool New York experience. Oh, actually, another one. Actually, when I was with our AWS team in New York, we saw Willem. We were dining, and Willem Dafoe was just sitting in
cool.
the next table. So that was cool. New York is a great place for those.
You got a lot. Yeah. You got a lot of people.
I forgot about that one. New York's cool.
The DC ones are not that.
No, they're not as exciting.
Having grown,
to my mother. Do not say that to my mother.
Oh, having grown up here and dealt with the traffic, and these people, they stopped the whole street, and they got the barricade, and you're like, all right, that's great. No, I don't know. I think being able to see some of these people that are true talents and doing it serendipitously is pretty fun. It's fun.
Yeah. Well, Kristin, thanks again for joining us on the show. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
Easy. I'm on LinkedIn. It's Kristin with 2 I's, and Sargent spelled Sargent. And my website is sargentinitiatives.com.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we link those in the show notes, and also on the post on LinkedIn, so folks can find you. So look, thanks again, Kristin, for joining us, and Rob, and thank you for listening and supporting the show. And if you like what we're doing, we'd love for you to leave a rating or a review. It'll really help us get the word out of the show, out on the show. And with that, thanks for listening, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye. Thanks, Kristin.
Bye. Thanks, gentlemen.